Good evening. We are live on Monday, the 16th of February, 2026. It's coming up to 9 p.m. UK time, and it's an hour ahead in Copenhagen, in Denmark, which is where my special guest is today. He's someone who relatively recently met, probably in the last couple of years. He's not a massive 45s fan because I appreciate in Copenhagen and in Denmark it's not as big a thing as it is in other countries, but he's got an incredible collection of them and has done some brilliant sets for me for Got It Covered, also on Coffee and Donuts and on 33 Day. Really interesting stuff, lots of library, funk, sort of jazz stuff, well put together, curated, incredible sets with great skill. So he reached out and said that he'd seen the show and he'd be interested in being a guest, and we've managed to put it together. Nyboe, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for being part of the 45-day community. You know, we connected and you've got involved by doing mixes for some of my projects, and it's always great to have a set from you. Now, this is the first time you've been on the show. So for all my guests that I have, and especially part of my journey, I'm always interested to see where the journey began and who from a young age first got you into music. So was it parents, brothers, sisters, siblings? Who was it who first got you into music?
Well, you can say my dad for this instance, because my dad was a huge record collector. At one point, he even sold some of his records so my mom and dad could get a new kitchen, as far as I know. He had a pretty big record collection when I was a kid. More or less not really anything for me. It was some of the old protest rock I did like, but he went into a lot of country as well that I still don't like. I'm still not old enough for that, even though he was old enough for that at my age. When I was really young, I was a huge Elvis Presley fan, and he had a lot of Elvis records. And I started buying my own records when I was like 6, 7 years old. I remember I bought my last vinyl for the first time in 91 when I bought like Michael Jackson Dangerous album. I didn't buy any records, vinyl records, until 2000 or late 2000, early 2001, because some Danish hip hop didn't come out on anything else than vinyl. Some of the stuff was vinyl only at that point. So that was actually what got me into that, was the vinyl only thing.
You bought vinyl up until 1991. And then you had a break until 2001. And we'll come back to that in a minute.
I did buy shitload of CDs in between, so it's not like I didn't collect music. It was more that the medium was like, it was CDs, cassette tapes, then I had a mini disc, and then I had a CD burner, and then MP3 players also came along around that time. I think I got my first one in like 2001. All types of medium, but also coming from hip hop, you know, it had to be vinyl. If I was to DJ, it had to be vinyl. And you know, the same thing, once you get started, it's hard to stop.
Yes, it is very hard to stop once you start buying vinyl. Now, you also spoke to me before we started the show that you were doing sort of music journalism from quite a young age, from about 13. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Being a huge hip hop fan, I started doing some music journalism for a local site called Undergrund.dk, which was, I think, the second site online that you could download MP3s from. When I was around 13, 14, I started doing like reviews and articles for them, and ended up being the music curator for the MP3 site there, the download site. So I was like doing a lot of stuff that was connected to it, but especially doing reviews of music and movies and stuff like that. I actually got into the music business and through music. Through that, then my dad had like an old microphone for speaking. That was from when he did some radio. He used to live at the Greenland Air Base. So he did some radio back then, and he had 2 old Akai radio mics. Sound shitty, and that was just plugged straight into my, you know, old sound card on my old desktop computer in like 2000 or something. And then I come from a very small town where there weren't many people listening to hip hop, and not really anyone rapping. It wasn't until I was like 15, 16, I started meeting people that really were doing that for real, at least that I became friends with. I did go to school in some other cities where some of the older guys was doing it, but I was also just a tiny kid that they were wondering why I was at the same parties. I got those microphones and started recording for some people, and quickly got a home studio, and that became a thing, and then like started a label. But we can get back to all that stuff. But it was like, it's been like gradually one step takes the other, and so it was the music journalism first, and then all the other things just came along.
So being obviously from a small town and obviously not having local acts, local hip hop acts or anything like that, how are you discovering this music? How are you finding out about it to be able to then write about it?
Online, actually. My dad was a computer engineer, radio mechanic, stuff like that, electronic mechanic. My mom was an electronic mechanic. So we had internet pretty early compared to a lot of other people. So we had internet back in 1995. Don't think I found anything Danish around that time. But in 96, the first Danish hip hop sites came along. And then I think it was 97, the site I started doing stuff for became a thing. So it can really be a thing when you do it like that. You know what I mean? I was discovering music a lot. I downloaded my first MP3 in 97, I think, which took about an hour, I think.
Exactly.
And it was like a 96 kilobit per second file or something. It was like crazy with a dial-up speed modem. And so then, I found hip hop side, underground hip hop. I had a subscription to the Source magazine. My dad was able to get one for me because he was officially on an American address when he was at Thule Air Base in Greenland. So he could just have it CC'd to me in Denmark.
Amazing.
Because otherwise you couldn't get it. But actually, for some weird reason, even my local kiosk, they always had like 1 or 2 copies. I know at least of one person that drove into the city from a smaller city to buy that. And there were a few other people listening to hip hop, but most of them were, they were all like 3-4 years older than me to 10 years older than me. You could do a bit of stuff there, and then, but also I had a lot of health issues when I was a kid. I was like sick at least half of the time probably, and at home a lot, so the internet was the way to do it when you can't really get out that much. And also got into a lot of like trouble in school, trouble outside of school, where or my mom wouldn't really let me go to like the concerts alone when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. So it came a bit later, and so it wasn't until I really knew people and was old enough that I could really go to those. Because when I was, even though I was hanging out with people going places, maybe none of them would go to like a hip hop concert or a show or to see DJ the way I wanted to see a DJ play. I grew up close to Aarhus, which is the second largest city in Denmark. And Aarhus actually has pretty legendary DJs. DJ Static especially was really big at that time. But we had, when I was younger, there was like Rasmus Schack, who's now also doing a lot of Brazilian records. There's Ghetto Sven, Eoko, so many DJs coming from Aarhus. So Aarhus was actually, you could get in there, get some good inspiration, really see some dope DJs, which probably also was why it took me a bit longer to really become a DJ, because you had to sort of live up to something, I feel, with that.
Now, lots of things to sort of take out from that. I love a couple of things. One is that obviously, because we are all music addicts, the fact that someone will drive into the city to buy the one copy of the Source magazine that was there is brilliant, because that's just what we do, isn't it? We travel around, we go digging normally for records, but here obviously digging for the magazine to be able to find out about records. It's great. And then the second thing, obviously, I'm sorry to hear, and obviously you mentioned to me before that there was issues with your health when you were a child, but the fact that you were able to use the internet from an early stage to sort of still have a community is basically what we're doing now. Obviously with Twitch, we've got a community. We can't connect to people sometimes in the real world, so we have to connect across the internet, across countries and continents. So it's incredible that even from a young age you appreciated that was a way of helping you get through the issues that you had. Now, you mentioned the microphones. I'm really interested to hear about that. So let's go to that bit. So you're using these microphones to record some raps. So are you producing the beats? Are your friends getting the beats? Are you sampling? What are you doing?
Yeah, some more, people were selling some beats on mp3.com back then. I think the first things that was recorded at my place were they were just using some instrumentals. One was from like a Danish rap group, and the others were instrumentals from some French rap tracks. Back then, in the late '90s, early 2000s, like France was like top of the pop for us with hip hop instrumentals. When it was getting a bit stagnant, we felt in the States. They were taking over. We felt, at least. Also, a bit of the German producers were doing really good. The microphone was like it's just one really thin, long microphone, and then there's like a big cap on it. And just to have it not sound too shitty, I would put a sock over it, so it was like a microphone with a sock. If I just record on my iPhone now, the sound quality is 100 times better. I did that back when I was still living at home with my mom, and then when I was 19, I think, I moved to a dorm. While I was at gymnasium high school, it's called in some countries, 11th, 12th grade. So I moved into a dorm room, and then I started having more serious home studio. Again, home studio for what it was back then, with like, especially the budget. I think my microphone was 600 kronas, which is 80 euros, I think, back then, when stuff wasn't even as cheap as it is now, even with the inflation. So again, even the microphone, I would record with a preamp and the microphone, get better sound with just my iPhone recording now, and have for years if I did that. So it's kind of crazy, you had to really set it up completely to, just with the reverb from the room, with everything, so most of the time people were just doing demos, or what we call drunk tracks, where people would come over like Friday or Saturday and get drunk and do tracks. So I would ask in advance, is it something we're using for something or not? Because I'm not going to spend all the time adjusting it for recording for each person and for the room if we're not using it.
Yeah.
And then one time they said, yeah, we're not going to use it. And then they wanted it for our first vinyl release. And then we tried to get someone else to mix it, and they couldn't mix it. I tried to mix it as well as I could, but it never really ended up sounding good. I was producing a bit, but I've only produced like 7 tracks, I think, in total, really. Then I've co-produced a lot, like done some bass lines or drums, and a lot of stuff where I find sample for people, or stuff like that. I also still have a huge bag of stuff I'm quite sure has never been sampled, and maybe at one point I'll do some beats myself, but preferably I don't like sitting in front of a computer doing stuff alone. I want to be more tactile. That's probably why I like the DJing, and especially it was vinyl DJing, in the beginning, and I used Serato mainly for a long time. But even when doing Serato, it would always be Serato vinyl, because I had to have the tactility, for it to work for me. That's, to me, personally, the only way to DJ. I can accept the, Serato vinyl DJing, because you still do the same things compared to like just pressing buttons or whatever. That's a whole nother discussion, and exactly. But we are in a vinyl community here, so I think a lot of people do.
I think most people who are into 45s or into vinyl can play with Serato, perhaps less on CDJs. I think you're right. I think most of the vinyl DJs, if they're playing digital, are using DVS. I mean, I used to use Tractor, now I use Serato, but it's I don't use it very much, but I can use it. But it is interesting. You described, I think, again before the show, that you did some producing, and then that ended up in a label. You put out some releases on a label. So take us to that part of the story.
It's actually pretty continuous with what I was doing. I was doing a lot of music reviews and articles, and started writing for some magazines. There started being a hip hop magazine called Action Speaks here in Denmark, and I started doing a whole lot of like hundreds and hundreds of press releases and copywriting and all that stuff. And then I had, the home studio, and 4 of my friends, we were sort of starting a crew. We had a crew at that point called Burger Inc., which was like a mixture of Burger King and Murder Inc. But that's also because there's like a old fable that Burger King was like the most hip hop thing in Denmark, because all the old breakers were breaking outside of Burger King. But they were only doing that because that was the town square in Copenhagen, and Burger King was right there. But then in late 90s, there was like a comedy group that was like more or less the Prunes, the producer group, hip hop producer group. They did a comedy group called Gamse Spectrum, where they did like a lot of skits with how Burger King was so hip hop. So we took that, we did like a remake of the Burger King logo where it was like ink written with blood over and stuff like that. And then we had Burger Inc. for like 2 years. But we only released one thing, and that was like a CD. It was supposed to be all 4 of the rappers, but 2 of them never really got enough stuff made, and the 2 others had so much in their catalog that we did a record where in 2004, only on CD, where we took like 1/3 for each, like 2/3 in total were solo tracks, and then the rest was those 2 doing tracks together, sort of as a group, and some with more features. So Together and Apart, it was called, if you translate it. And that was like the first dive into that, also into like stuff like mastering, me showing up with a track that I produced and recorded, and apparently having mastered it completely myself. So there was nothing for them to do with that track, which was both good and bad, because how does it get to sound like the other stuff on the album? But you learn through doing. We did a lot of mistakes, but learned a lot from doing that. A couple years later, one of the rappers from that CD and another rapper who was also in that crew, part of that crew that was supposed to be released, Ham Lang and Kaiser A, they started getting a lot of success because there's freestyle rap became like the biggest thing in Denmark around 2003, 2004, after 8 Mile came out. Here they had like sold out for a few thousand people in like a really fancy music place, put a boxing ring in the middle of it, and had people battle rap in that freestyle only, top of the head freestyle. And my friend won it in 2004 when it was on the top, and it was sent live on national TV, on like the main national TV channel. And I think they reran it like 6 or 7 times in prime time. It actually got so big that he also got mental health issues and more or less isolated himself because he couldn't really go out without being recognized. But he managed to get through that, and they started a group together. 2 years later, they got on the national radio talent competition and won that one, which meant they had like 2 hits in prime time and started touring a lot. The biggest hip hop label in Denmark, Run for Cover, which I also later ended up working for, they were going to do that record, but only on CD. And we thought that being hip hop, it needed to be on vinyl. So we started the label, me and 2 of my friends, to just release that EP on vinyl. Only a few months later, another friend of ours, a Danish rapper called Jøden, who was one of the biggest rappers at the time, he also got a record deal, but the record label wouldn't release vinyl. And actually, like in the early 2000s, the Danish hip-hop vinyl started being like, a lot of stuff was only on vinyl. And then in like 2005-ish, label like Run for Cover were told like they had to stop selling vinyl and start selling CDs because, otherwise they wouldn't survive. So we came in to like release some of those on vinyl. And then after like 4 or 5 years, Run for Cover started releasing a lot of vinyl again, because then the demand had like skyrocketed again. So it was kind of funny, because hip hop was the only thing, more or less, where you had vinyl when no one else was doing vinyl. But then when it started getting a bit popular with vinyl, it sort of was overtaken a bit and not as popular. And then it really started hitting. And then it's also got oversaturated. And
it's amazing that vinyl has survived and has these ups and downs. And like you say, you were in a position where you were able to put out things on vinyl because you knew that the hip hop community wanted them on vinyl, and because that is the culture of hip hop.
Yeah.
That's where it sort of all started in the first place. But I love that you doing a release of things that wouldn't otherwise have come out on vinyl, that you were stepping in, filling in the gap, and doing that. How did things progress from there? So I think you said that DJing came a little bit later, maybe 2006?
Yeah, the DJing started the same year. I would say they started sort of aligned. I had the label from 2006 to 2016. Between that, I think it was 23 or 24 vinyl records and a lot of digital releases as well. On that label, Idiotic, I had back then, I stopped the label because I started working at Run for Cover, which was the biggest hip-hop label, who's done, I think, 130 or 40 Danish hip-hop vinyl records. And Idiotic started to release the stuff that didn't come out on vinyl, but it quickly became doing original releases on vinyl. And I was lucky enough to do some comebacks with some of my favorite rappers Danish rappers after they hadn't released stuff in some years and had some really dope releases, I feel. And when I switched to Run for Cover, a lot of it was releasing all the stuff that came out in the 90s and 2000s that never came out on vinyl. Even newer, like from the 10s, that were never out on vinyl, that we wanted to have released on vinyl. So that was a lot of what we were working on. Of course, also releasing the best new things that we wanted on vinyl that we were able to, if they didn't come out on vinyl themselves, but not as much releasing things as a label anymore at that point. The DJing part, I've been curating and controlling music at parties and stuff like that since the late 90s, since I was like a preteen teen stuff. To me, you were only a real DJ when you were spinning at hip-hop jams, 2 turntables, a mixer, doing it, beat mixing, doing all the stuff, scratching, all that. To me, I didn't start DJing in my head until 2006. I did control music at some other stuff once in a while and control music for some rappers sometimes, and stuff like that. The thing I attribute to me starting as a DJ back then was people kept trying to book me to be a DJ, and I wasn't really a DJ. Also, I have a lot of social anxiety, so my anxiety actually kept me from doing it for a lot of years as well, along with a lot of the health issues I had. Like in 2002, I was hospitalized for a long time, out for a long time, and had some other issues throughout the years, also mental health issues. And with the social anxiety, I had to find someone to DJ with. So I only started DJing because I found a friend I could DJ with. Because then I could take the breaks and we could be 2 people up there. The focus wasn't as much on me. You could hide a bit more. And also, then I would have enough records because I didn't have enough money to buy all the stuff. Having only bought CDs in the 90s, where a lot of the hip hop we wanted to play was from, a lot of those had gotten expensive when you got into the early 2000s, already back then. And the reissues hadn't come yet back then. We could have like twice the collection because we were 2 people. And the same, I DJ'd with my friend René. I actually recently did like a walk and talk interview with him about like how we did 20 years ago, because he stopped DJing around 2 years after that, and ended up living in Berlin doing techno. So he kind of went a different way. He also did a lot of hip hop and trip hop and stuff like that in between. And then I DJ'd for a few more years with a guy called OJ, who was a producer, really dope, talented hip hop producer. Then he stopped producing and DJing and started being a cameraman, and is now one of the best cameramen in Denmark. So, people just go different ways. And then I DJ'd a bit with a few other people and ended up doing it alone, and was comfortable enough now in my own skin and overcame a lot of the anxiety issues with, exposure therapy, I guess you can say. So I was able to start DJing alone at that point, but it wasn't 2006 it started. And then in 10, 11, 2012 was where it got, the biggest for me as a DJ. I was like, I was also very selective. I at one point calculated that I said no to 93% of all the gigs I got, asked to do, because I only wanted to do like a certain kind of things. And I did nightclubs. When I did nightclubs, it was smaller things, like loungy, more stuff. But I would also do like a 7-hour, set to like have a long journey and like play from like 10 in the evening to 5 in the morning and do like a whole journey. That was also what maybe one of the things that was part of like me then getting an injury in my neck where I was out for almost 3 years. So that was what happened around 2012. So
Is that at the sort of peak of your sort of DJing career up to that point, and then suddenly you had this
yeah,
injury?
yeah, it was. I would say that was the peak. Also, skill wise, probably still the peak because I have permanent nerve damage and some stuff I can't do as well technically. I feel now, so I can't play for that long because of pain and arthritis and like my fingers swell up. But I also, what happened in 2012 was that I had like a disc that burst in my neck. So my
Right.
neck went like this. And for 9 months, they sort of misdiagnosed it because they were like, it can't be like discus prolapsing because they can't see anything, pointing out. There was nothing pointing out because it had burst. Liquid from the disc had like starched around my nerves, so they like damaged them permanently. After 9 months, I got an operation, got like 4 screws and a rubber ball inserted, and so I can't really move my neck that well. I have to like do it to like not get in too much pain, but I have some issues there. I spent like I think almost 3 years learning to DJ again and getting through that situation. Like I was out for like 9 months. I was completely bedridden, like maybe at one point 23 and a half hours a day on so much morphine I would hallucinate, and so many other painkillers because I had like the most extreme nerve damage you could have that was like equivalent to like a childbirth constantly. So then I got the operation, which like lowered it a bit, but still a lot of permanent damage, and then a lot of rehab getting back. And I still have a lot of issues from that, and I only can work a certain amount of hours. I have a cap on that, and I can only DJ a certain amount of times a month because my body can only sustain that much. So, I started again, I think in 15. And then I started slowly getting back up. And I think it was 16, 17, early 17, I started really getting back on track. But then I was only doing Serato because I couldn't carry any vinyl records, and I had to like do some stuff where I didn't have to listen as much in the headphones, and so until I was ready to not like do this, I had to learn to mix through my headphones instead of through the monitor as I was used to. I think it was early 2017, I went on tour with one of the rappers. I recorded a live set at the last venue here in Copenhagen called Vega, and then I sent it into like one of Reloop's mixtapes competitions, and that one won the mixtape competition over the people doing like recorded edited mixtapes, even though it was a live mix with errors that you always have live. So that gave me sort of like the will to like start doing a bit more with that. But then I also started working at Run for Cover at that label where I was responsible for all the vinyl and both like the vinyl shop, so where we had like between 1,000 and 1,200 different hip-hop records in stock. I spent a lot of time, my energy on that, learning new music, releasing the music, distributing music, everything there. I did still DJ quite a bit, but not as focused and not as much as I do now because I didn't have the energy with that. I started peaking it again, doing a bit more around 2020, and then we get to the lockdown. And
God, I just can't imagine that you were at the peak of the DJ career at that point, and obviously then it just stops. And like you say, the health issues, it must have been very difficult. I guess you must have been thinking, am I ever going to get back into DJing? Am I ever going to be able to do this again? And from someone who loves music and loves vinyl from such a young age, that must have been very difficult. How did you deal with that aspect of it?
Yeah, that's been difficult to deal with. Also, I think around that time I started playing piano again. I had played piano when I was younger a bit, but I also couldn't do it. I can't now at all play it. I used to draw a lot. I cannot draw. There's a lot of stuff I can't do. I don't know. I've been used to setbacks. I was a singer when I was younger, pretty good singer. When I was 12, I was at like a choir thing where I strained my voice and got throat catarrh. So my vocal cords, they grew time glass shape. I can't hit anything in pitch anymore since I have perfect pitch, which is part of being autistic. Generally, I learned I can't sing, so I've already had setbacks before in what was music and hobby like that, or passion like that, and I couldn't write as much either. I used to write a lot, and also doing that with your fingers with the nerve damage was also an issue. So actually, to come back on track, I went down to a local record store and cafe that was in Aarhus back then, called Stardust Cafe, which was a record store and cafe and also live music venue, where they have like small, especially jazz concerts, all the time. And I started working 30 minutes a week down there. With all the experience I had from my label, I was pretty much an expert in, music promotion. So I having the label, I learned to do everything myself, even the graphics, videos, but also learned how everything works in, promotion and marketing. And I was already a copywriter, and so I started helping them with some branding and marketing and a lot of other stuff for like 30 minutes a week. Then almost 3 years I was up to like 12 hours a week. So I had like slowly progressed and gotten more and more back into some stuff. And at the end I was DJing once in a while as well for special events, mostly release parties, and what's always been one of my favorite things to do, like being the warm-up act for international artists, because then you get to be like the glue in between the different artists playing. Same as with jams back then, but jams stopped sort of being a thing in the 2010s already in Denmark. But yeah, it was pretty hard. I probably also why I ended up doing it again, because I have a hard time not doing it, but also it's hard to talk about this without going into the pandemic, because then in 2020, when the lockdown came in Denmark, it was a pretty big lockdown. So people were not really allowed to go many places, except for maybe shopping, like daily goods. So I was at home a lot. Everyone was at home a lot. So I started DJing and live streaming from home a lot, back when Facebook would allow you to do that. It really never became a thing here on Twitch either. Like Twitch is, for some reason, I don't know anyone here in Denmark doing Twitch, except if they do gaming. So it is kind of interesting with that. But until Facebook closed it down, and then it was a bit more like maybe on Mixcloud or YouTube Live, until they stopped that as well. I did that, and then my, the next, joint in my neck did the same thing.
Oh.
Luckily this time it didn't burst, but that also put me out for a long time and put me in an extreme amount of pain and being isolated. And I also ended up, with some mental issues there again, actually, where I was I was at the psychiatric ward for, I think, 3 months. In that period, also having a lot of other things happen, having a girlfriend break up with you when you're isolated and you can't really meet people, and the music thing being taken away from you again, but mostly the pain of all of it, and a lot of other stuff happened. And trying to, find things to do. I, did a record project with Run for Cover where I worked, where I had some of the rappers in Denmark do a track together, or 2 tracks together. I think it was 20-something, 23 rappers maybe in total. But we found 2 through a competition, and then the rest was invites, and they had to record at home individually and had 2 producers do beat, and then we ended up doing a record on vinyl people could buy, and do a live stream with some instrumental hip hop as well that also came on the record, and the beat from the rap competition also was on the vinyl, and then it would only be produced in the amount that was pre-ordered and stuff like that. So that was like also getting through doing some projects like that. But I was training, and then again, I couldn't DJ for a year and a half, 2 years almost. I was out again until 2022. I think I did my first gig in 2022 in February or something. After that, I also sent that into the Reloop mixtape competition and won again. So I was like, that okay, at least I'm doing the right thing. And then it sort of caught up. Some years before the lockdown, I had started playing more regular vinyl gigs once in a while. I had been asked to do that, and whenever I played in the record store, it would be vinyl only. Late 2023, I think, I met someone called Phoebe, she had never DJed on vinyl, but she wished to do it. But she wasn't Danish. She didn't speak Danish, and she couldn't find any DJ school to go to. She couldn't go to the Female Future Sound because she didn't speak Danish. She would come by, I would show her some stuff, and then I started, teaching and mentoring her. And in doing that, I got inspired myself because she wanted to do only vinyl. I got inspired to okay, I'm gonna focus on only doing vinyl as well, and so more or less only done vinyl since then. Where I worked at Run for Cover in late 2022, and then in early, I think April, May 2023, Run for Cover where I worked went bankrupt, and I had to figure out something else, and I started getting a more regular job at an office where I had regular work hours, which I hadn't had in 20 something years. And because I had regular working hours, I actually was able to DJ more and have more energy and be able physically and mentally to be able to do that more. I focused more on DJing and being focused as well on more of just playing on vinyl. I did my Instagram page. I created that one in, I think, April or May of maybe March of 2023 to be like a promotion tool and to also be like the curating of all these vinyl records I have, and to find a way to still deal with vinyl records after not working with it because it had gone bankrupt and was stopping. So that became like the therapy for getting through that, maybe, and focusing so much on vinyl was that. And then I hadn't done a real mixtape. I'd only done like live mixes since I did one in like 2008 or 2009 with OJ. But yeah, I focused on doing some mixtapes and like putting together more than just live mixes, and started, releasing mixtapes through different places. And then you came in, and I just started doing some live streams and mixtapes for you as well, and for some of the other things. And all the stream things has been like for you guys here, more or less.
Yeah.
So that's been really dope.
Again, a few things that come out of all this, and first of all, I have to like commend you that your resilience, or even one or two of those things that you've described that have happened to you over the last few years could have been enough to, turn you off it completely and to sort of give up and do whatever. But, like you say, you've been through a lot of difficulties, and it sounds like the music and DJing and the vinyl has partly got you through it. And it's great to see that it's had such an important impact on you. And like you said, you used it a little bit like therapy for that period of time to sort of get you through it.
You can say a lot of stuff about me, but mostly of all, you can probably say I'm stubborn. So that probably helps. Like, that's both a good and a bad thing, but all my friends say I'm a bit too stubborn.
And then the next thing, obviously, you've described that in Denmark, Twitch just wasn't really a thing. And it's interesting because obviously I'm on Twitch all the time, and I meet people all the time from different parts of the world. There is certain countries that just have never really embraced it, certainly from a DJ point of view. So you said obviously you were aware of some gamers, no other DJs?
There were a few during Corona, but since they got nobody watching on Twitch, they actually don't have their profiles anymore, I even think. I couldn't even find them searching for them on Twitch anymore. And also back then, Twitch also started penalizing people for DJing until they got the DJ program here. So probably also an issue for some. Not many people even live stream DJing in Denmark in general. I think maybe also we just have enough places to go see DJs, at least in Copenhagen. Which is ironic because you can more or less only go see DJs play vinyl in Copenhagen. Okay. It's the second largest city. There's like a lot of really good vinyl DJs that live there, and I think there are two places maybe really, unless you're maybe, if you go into electronic music, you can maybe count one or two more, but there are very few places to play vinyl. I think I only know of two places I might even potentially be able to play. There are a lot in Copenhagen. We have a lot of listening bars. There's a lot of culture around wine bars and having vinyl DJs playing there, like embracing the Japanese listening bar culture and stuff like that. So I don't know if that speaks into it that, we still have like a fifth of the population living around here. So maybe that speaks into it. I have no idea. Some do stream a bit on Instagram, but not much. Some venues stream on Mixcloud. Often there's like 2 viewers. So
it's difficult, and it's a struggle. And I think I've been on here almost 6 years now. For me, it's a very different. I'm not just a DJ. Obviously, I'm interviewing people. I'm putting on events. I'm streaming from events, and we're doing all sorts of things. But it's difficult, and you have to want to do it and carry on to build. And if there's not many people in your own country live streaming and there's not many people watching it, then it's difficult to keep it going. But we're lucky that our sort of brand and what we're doing attracts people from around the world. Now let's talk about vinyl. Obviously, massive vinyl collection. Now you don't have a huge amount of 45s, because I don't think there is a huge selection of 45s. From what I understand, they didn't really press them in Copenhagen that much, 45s.
It did, but I don't think in the same amount or the same way. I think mostly for jukeboxes. Also, I'm not personally the biggest fan of 45s, as mixing and scratching with them I actually find harder to do than with like a regular 12-inch. It has its it has its good points. Like I always bring like this bag, this size, with 7 inches when I play. And I do, if you turn around, I have like a bunch of 7 inches over there. There are some 7 inches over here, and the whole leg, the whole part of the shelf underneath here. There's also like this amount twice of 7 inches. So I do have a lot of 7 inches probably compared to most other people around here. But there are a few, like DJ Carsten, for example, here in Copenhagen. He might mainly just plays 7 inches a lot. There are some people doing it, but it's not as big a culture as like some places. But that's also why it could be interesting doing at one point like a 45-day event here in Copenhagen to try to like
just to see
focus on and also some stores do have a good 7-inch selection still here, because we actually have a lot of, even though Copenhagen doesn't have that big of 7-inch culture, Copenhagen is known for its record stores and record shops internationally. We have so many DJs coming here today. Like we do have, compared to country size, whatever, one of the best selection. Like if I go to other places, usually they don't live up to Copenhagen selection outside of the mainstream. A lot of people go to Panama and find 7 inches, for example, Panama City Records here, and every place has a bunch of 7 inches in some form. Even Palm Springs has a few, and Beat has a few. And nowadays, some things are being reissued on 7-inch that are only on 7-inch as well. And some new releases have started coming more on 7-inch. It seems that like Sweden has more 7-inch culture, for example. Even Malmö, just across the river, or Slows does a lot of 45s. Mr. True Fresh does a lot of 45s.
We'll definitely explore it, and it's definitely on the list. And I don't know if we'll get to it this year, but maybe next year.
And there is a bit more. Like I think tomorrow it is Rasmus Schack from Batuquis. He's doing, I think, mostly Brazilian 7 inches at a thing called Funky Tuesday. That's like a 3-hour thing in the city here in Copenhagen. And for their yearly event, they have like a Funky Tuesday All Stars. Most people only bring 7 inches.
Okay,
not all, but like 2/3 of the DJs playing, and every DJ play like 15 minutes. And then you have like a bunch of DJs playing a long time. But it's also a bit of like they play different styles. Like I think I can remember if it was 13 or 17 records I went through in like 15 minutes. Some played 2 or 3. It's also different ways of playing and mixing and how you go about it. For me also, it's being a record collector and fan as just listening to music. 7 inches are not practical for listening.
You
can't get around that.
An LP or a compilation, or like something like that.
If I'm not DJing with them, they're impractical. For some DJing stuff, they are practical, and I have a lot of them for that reason. I have a lot of them also for doing the challenges, like for you when you challenge to do a mix for it. Probably will do one for you as well when it's 45 day. And
Yeah.
I recently did. I think it's not announced yet, so I can't really publicly announce that as much. But I recently did a 7-inch mixtape as well with an international pretty big name, I would say, who's known for
Cool.
doing only 7 inches, that I actually got in contract through with you when he came to Copenhagen to shop for records.
Amazing.
That's coming out on cassette tape where we have like a side each, and we're also actually, I'm going to his part of the world to do the release party, only bringing 7 inches where we only play 7 inches.
Yeah.
And also playing a 7-inch set in a record store there. So, it's not like 7 inches is nothing. It's just that I always prefer, like, coming from hip hop, a 12-inch, single, if it is even a single, then, also you can have more. Also, just the speed, 45 as a speed doesn't sound as good mixing in, I feel, when you cut it in.
Fair enough. We're sort of coming to the end of the show. I can't believe that hour has flown by, but we'll definitely do another show at some point because there's lots more information I'd love to find out about your life and the things you've done through. I asked my guests, and this is something that comes from Mark Lancaster on the very first show, who said when we did the show with John Musto and Double P, what 45s lift your spirits? It's then gone on to be asked by me in different shows on this channel. And then also it's created the 45-day uplifting mix. Now, I know you said this was a little bit tricky sort of finding 3 uplifting songs, but you managed to find 3. So tell us about the 3 you've picked out and why you picked them out.
Yeah, first of all, it's for me a huge challenge. I'm more or less, if you hear my mixes, you can hear it's not uplifting music I generally listen to. It is, the tonality is usually different, the thematics, the vibe is kind of different usually. So it's even doing the uplifting mix, especially with only 45s, that was really challenging for me, having to work that in. And I even had to think a lot about doing that compared to what I feel I have to for other mixes. But I chose 3 records, 3 pretty different styles, I would say. The first is like a Swedish rapper called ADL, produced by DJ Devastate, rest in peace. It's called Medicine. It's like a very bouncy, can't even remember if it's a Marvin Gaye sample, I think. The crazy dope thing out on Counterweight Records, from I think 12 years ago or something. If you heard like that Stro Elliott Marvin Gaye record, which I never bought when we had it in the store I worked in, because I was like, I'm just gonna get it next time, I'll let the customers get it, and then it got expensive immediately. The danger of working in a record store, I've had that happen to a lot. But I'll just show this real quick. ADL Medicine, crazy dope Swedish hip hop record. I actually used that one for the 7-inch mixtape that's coming up. And I also used this next one. And that came out in 2025 here. This is, some people will recognize the cover, but will not recognize this version of it. This is Alexander's Orchestra, American, as far as I remember. He did a cover version of Le Bracelet. I'm probably butchering that, from La Planète Sauvage, which I'm probably butchering as well. An amazing, I actually can't remember if it's French or I think it's Belgian soundtrack. I'll just quickly show the, it is an alternative cover, but this is the original soundtrack.
Yeah.
For those who don't know it, it's an animated psychedelic movie, known especially for being sampled by Madlib. He did a version of Le Bracelet that's, in my opinion, better than the original, especially because it has like a crazy drum break and crazy drums. And the last one, especially because I was reminded of it watching, I forgot the title of the movie. There's recently a Brazilian movie about the state coup and how they abducted people, about a politician who got abducted, killed, and family never found out until what happened to him until like 30 years later or something. But Tom C. de Miranda C. I don't know if people can read it from here, but it's also a staple of I played a lot of break events or dance events through the years. I haven't played break events for a while. Mostly play hip hop dance events now. Would like to play break events again, but I recently also did a break mix. I hadn't done in a long time for the breakers, using that and a lot of other stuff, because it's a very uplifting song. I feel in the like style and tempo. Like, I actually don't think it's that uplifting of a song if you really go for it, but I actually don't understand the lyrics, so I wouldn't know. It's a huge classic from the 70s. It has a drive that is uplifting for me.
Really good choices. And as I said, hopefully maybe next year we can do something in Copenhagen. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for being open and honest and talking about what must have been very difficult points of your life. But like I said earlier on, it's the resilience that you kept going. And hopefully anyone watching this show can take that from this point and, just keep going. If it's something you enjoy, try and work through and get to do what you want to do.
Yeah. I'll just quickly show one thing as well.
Of course.
About that. Because that's also just a bit about how much community can mean for something. When I talk about in 2020, I was not feeling well. The whole hip hop community came together in a closed hip hop group that I didn't know about. So only the people who knew each other in that, and did they did this where they have the names of all the people, where it's like a get well thing with all the names from people in the community. And they also collected gift cards and money to get stuff to rehab and get well. And one of my best friends, he came in with a gift basket of stuff and drinks and stuff they knew I liked, just to get my spirits up, which was crazy. And even did I don't know if people can see the Still Loving Nyboe, because I did as a joke, I did a Still Not Loving Nyboe t-shirt 10 years earlier as part of a promo campaign. And then they actually ended up being run for cover before I worked at them, did the t-shirt, and I think it was several thousand posters for a magazine with it. So it's more to just say community is also it's not something you do alone often. It's the community as it is. Sounds like through you and what you experienced with finding the community here, that it's often the community that can also pull you back up, or at least give you the motivation to keep on going when things are tough, I think. Because it's also a community, at least the hip hop community, where you don't always agree, and you don't know, you're not always on the best terms with everyone, especially me as an artist who I'm not able to say anything I don't mean, or not be truthful about everything. So that can cause some tensions. But even those people are on this, because the community is also an important thing. So having that many people come together, and that in itself is such a big motivation.
That's such a great way to finish the show. That's amazing, and that's something that you'll have forever. And every time you look at that, that'll lift your spirits. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for all your stories.
Yeah, thanks for having me.